The night felt calm as a soft shimmer rose across the quiet sky. A thin glow drifted like a gentle breath moving through darkness. Astronomers watched in stillness as the heavens shifted with a subtle grace. The atlas glided inward with a slow confidence that felt strangely intentional. No one expected the sky to whisper before anything else changed. For months, the object moved deeper into the inner system without concern. It appeared ordinary at first, with a faint glow shaped by distant sunlight. Early scans offered nothing unusual and reassured those who observed patiently. Then the light curve flickered once like a heartbeat hidden in shadow. The brightness dipped in a pattern no natural body had ever shown. A soft rise followed, as if something inside the visitor slowly awakened. Scientists leaned closer to their screens, sensing the shift with quiet unease. This was not the silent wanderer they had charted with steady confidence. The curve bent in a way that carried intention rather than randomness. Each dip felt too smooth for fractured reflections drifting across stone. Each rise stretched gently, as if learning how to breathe light again. Something delicate stirred within the object as the numbers changed softly. Night after night, a faint shimmer returned, shaping new quiet irregularities. Patterns formed slowly like a message being written in the sky. Old models cracked quietly under the weight of the unexplained shift. The object felt aware, though no one dared speak such a thought aloud. Charts trembled as another unnatural wave formed without warning. The deeper 3 Atlas moved inward, the more its glow behaved intentionally. Silence in observatories grew heavier as each pulse returned with patience. No natural body should change brightness with such careful precision. Some whispered that something unseen was beginning to reveal itself. The sky felt as if it held its breath, waiting for the truth to emerge. Every reading hinted at a quiet shift, rising from within the visitor, and the world sensed that the first sign of a far deeper mystery had arrived. The first pulse arrived quietly beneath a calm night sky. Astronomers noticed it only because the darkness felt slightly disturbed. A faint flash rose from the distant object like a shy breath in space. It flickered once gently, then folded back into the endless black around it. No urgency touched the night, only a soft moment of unexpected light. Another observatory saw the same faint rhythm echo across their screens. Their instruments trembled slightly as the pulse repeated again with precision. The alignment was too perfect to dismiss as random interference again. The flash carried a quiet intention hidden beneath its delicate consistency. It felt like a heartbeat rising from something far beyond familiar understanding. Telescopes from distant continents confirmed that the rhythm was shared. Each station recorded the same gentle rise of light moving with uncanny order. The pulses followed an exact spacing as if measured by an unseen clock. A global tension formed silently as the timing continued without deviation. Scientists leaned closer to their monitors as the pattern sharpened slowly. The object seemed to breathe with calm intention across the celestial dark. Some whispered that data does not breathe unless something shapes the rhythm. A soft unease settled across control rooms as pulses strengthened gradually. No one wanted to say the word signal, but the thought hovered quietly. The light rose in a careful wave, then sank again like a slow cosmic inhale. Observers felt their own breath mirror the rhythm without conscious effort. The sensation was subtle but heavy, like hearing a distant whisper underwater. If the pulse was noise, it should fade or distort, but it remained unwavering. If the pulse was an accident, it should scatter, yet it only grew clearer. The night felt tighter each time the flash returned with perfect consistency. The object's surface glowed briefly, then dimmed with eerie elegance again. Some compared it to a beacon, though no known beacon breathed like this. Others saw a pattern shaped by intelligence, though no one dared confirm yet. The flashes continued across the following nights, rising in slow confidence. Each pulse seemed to test the silence around it like a searching question. Engineers recalibrated their instruments again, but the rhythm held perfectly. Whatever moved inside that distant object was repeating with clear persistence. A strange understanding spread among astronomers watching from dim control rooms. They were witnessing something that did not behave like a drifting rock. The pattern felt deliberate, like a hand knocking softly from a locked door. Yet no one could imagine who or what would knock across cosmic distances. The pulses strengthened in brightness but never rushed or demanded attention. They arrived gently, almost respectfully, as if aware of being observed. Some researchers felt the strange sense of being acknowledged in return. They described the feeling quietly as if afraid the words might be true. One scientist watched the pulses repeat and whispered that it felt alive. Another insisted that light cannot think, yet could not explain the timing. Across the world, screens glowed with synchronized flickers like shared breaths. The rhythm wrapped around observatories like an invisible thread of presence. Instruments were not supposed to react emotionally, yet the rooms felt tense. The objects seemed to speak without sound, using light shaped into quiet intention. Patterns formed carefully as if building towards some slow, meaningful revelation. No scientific model predicted such behaviour, yet models could not deny the data. The whispers among astronomers grew heavier each night the pulses returned. They knew they were watching more than a cosmic visitor drifting aimlessly. They were watching something express itself through synchronized cosmic light. And each repetition carried a softness that felt strangely intimate and aware. Some wondered quietly if the object was calling to something beyond Earth. Others feared the possibility that it was calling to Earth itself. The pulses increased slightly in brightness, like a voice gaining confidence. Yet they never turned aggressive, only gentle, persistent, and unexpectedly calm. Scientists gathered in dim rooms, whispering theories they barely dared believe. The object was not speaking in any language known, but communication persisted. The rhythm was a message shaped by silence and written with cosmic breath. And as each synchronized flash crossed the world, that truth grew harder to ignore. Something distant was reaching outward with patient, deliberate light. Something ancient, perhaps, or newly awakened within the drifting structure. Observatories felt smaller with each pulse, as if watched from immense distance. Yet the feeling carried no threat, only a quiet, searching presence. A question lingered in every room, though no one wished to voice it. What kind of mind speaks through light instead of sound? And why did it choose now to be seen? The first temperature reading arrived with a quiet sense of disbelief. Instruments reported a soft, cooling wave drifting across the object's shadowed surface. The numbers fell lower than any model had predicted for its distance from sunlight. Scientists checked their sensors twice, then checked their doubts 3 times more. Nothing about the reading felt stable, yet every digit remained perfectly consistent. The object cooled with intention, as if aware of how it shed its heat. Then without warning, the temperature rose gently like a slow awakening breath. It warmed not because of sunlight, but because something inside responded softly. The rise followed a smooth curve too elegant for chaotic thermal behaviour. Heat radiated with a shape that matched no natural cooling pattern anywhere. Observers stared at the graphs unfolding like a pulse hidden beneath stone. The curve moved upward with careful control as if guided by internal awareness. Then it paused for a long moment like a creature adjusting to its environment. Another cooling wave followed as though the object tested its own limits quietly. No meteor or drifting rock had ever behaved with such deliberate thermal balance. Some whispered the word anomaly, while others whispered something far heavier inside. The phrase self-regulation spread across observatories like a fragile secret. Data analysts watched new readings form delicate shapes that resembled intention. It was as if the object breathed in warmth, then exhaled it, with slow control. Each shift carried a smoothness impossible for a natural surface of dust and ice. The heating resembled a methodical internal process rather than simple radiation. Some compared it to an engine idling softly beneath the layers of cosmic debris. Others felt the unease of witnessing something that adjusted itself carefully. Scientists attempted new simulations, but none could replicate the temperature arcs. Every model predicted jagged lines, while the real readings flowed like gentle waves. The object seemed to understand its own thermal state with unsettling clarity, almost as if protecting itself from the cold, vacuum surrounding it patiently. Its surface warmed again, following a sequence that resembled deliberate calibration. A pattern emerged, repeating softly like a cycle practiced across endless journeys. The temperature oscillated between precise points as if following an inner blueprint. Engineers argued over the impossibility while the data remained undeniably real. When sunlight brushed the object, a new shock spread across monitoring stations. Instead of heating rapidly like any normal body, it cooled further for several minutes. The act felt like defiance, a quiet refusal to obey thermodynamic behaviour. Then, in a gentle rise, its warmth returned slowly like a mind adjusting thoughtfully. This cycle repeated night after night with unwavering intentional precision. The deeper the object drifted into the system, the more deliberate the temperature felt. Observers sensed the chilling idea that something inside was responding actively. The object behaved as though balancing its heat around some hidden internal structure. The thermal zones aligned in patterns that hinted at compartments or chambers. The idea of machinery emerged quietly, though spoken only in hushed, nervous tones. Nothing about the thermal readings resembled a dead, drifting relic of frozen stone. Instead, they resembled a system testing itself like an engine recovering memory. The oscillation stabilized further, creating a soft, rhythmic thermal heartbeat. No rock breathes with warmth and cold like this, yet it breathed undeniably. Each thermal pulse carried a softness that felt frighteningly alive in its precision, as though the object responded to unseen forces or internal commands long buried. Some believed it was awakening slowly after ages spent in deep cosmic silence. Others feared that it was listening, testing, watching as its temperature shifted calmly. The night grew heavier when a final reading formed a perfect repeating curve. The temperature rose exactly to the same point as the night before without deviation, then cooled again to the same lower threshold with unsettling symmetry. It was a cycle with purpose, a rhythm shaped by something more than physics. And as researchers stared at the silent glowing graph, a quiet dread formed. They realized the object was not drifting helplessly through the void around it. It was maintaining itself with a patience that felt ancient and unhurried. Something inside was alive, not biologically, but in a deeper, colder, mechanical way. The kind of life that thinks slowly and moves only when necessary. Scientists felt the breathless sense that the object was preparing for something. Its temperature shifts resembled readiness, rather than random thermal fluctuations. And as the last reading settled with unnatural calm, a thought echoed wordlessly. Whatever 3i Atlas was doing, it had not finished awakening. The first change in light did not come from the sun. It came from the object itself, shifting how it reflected the darkness. Telescopes watched its surface brighten then dim without any change in distance. Sunlight stayed constant, yet the object behaved as if turning unseen mirrors inside. Its reflectivity rose in sudden smooth steps like panels quietly unlocking. Then it fell again with the same soft, intentional precision. No dust cloud passed between it and the starry background behind. No known process could twist light so gently without leaving a physical trace. At first, astronomers assumed surface roughness or rotation causing familiar flicker changes. But the timing of each shift was too structured to belong to chance. The brightness did not follow any expected spin pattern or tumbling behaviour. Instead, it moved like a set of hidden panels opening and closing together. Certain angles became suddenly bright as though smooth surfaces had turned toward them. Moments later, those same angles went dark while others awakened with new glints. It was as if the object was rearranging how the cosmos saw it. The light curve stopped looking messy and began to look choreographed. Observers could almost feel something inside deciding what to reveal and what to hide. One researcher described it as a shell learning how to face the sun. Another compared it to armor plates shifting quietly into more deliberate alignment. The idea of panels emerged slowly whispered in late-night conversations between data checks. If they were panels, they did not behave like anything attached to debris. They rotated without visible inertia, stopping sharply at exact brightness thresholds. The object seemed to test different configurations as if mapping incoming radiation. Sometimes one entire side brightened like a polished surface suddenly exposed. Other times only thin slivers of reflection appeared like narrow windows of metal. Each pattern repeated more than once as though stored within some hidden protocol. The sky around it remained the same, yet its behaviour grew stranger nightly. Light did not simply bounce off it anymore. Light obeyed some deeper arrangement. The object seemed to sculpt illumination the way a lens shapes a beam. It redirected brightness away from certain lines of sight and concentrated it toward others. Some observatories saw it dim, while others recorded an increase at the same moment. This directional behaviour hinted at surfaces that could choose where to send light. Natural rock cannot aim brightness, yet this one almost seemed to do so. Certain angles produced a glint like a distant eye briefly catching starlight. When instruments shifted to track that glint, it often vanished with unsettling precision. It felt like being noticed and then quietly ignored by something watching back. The reflectivity changes were not wild, they were controlled and nearly graceful. Patterns emerged resembling test sequences, each one slightly more refined than the last. Sometimes the object brightened in a band while the rest remained deliberately dark, as though a ring of panels had rotated while other sections stayed dormant. That ring would then fade, replaced by a new patch shifting into focus. The visual impression was not of chaos, but of a system cycling through modes. A faint intuition grew among observers that the shell was not just surface. It might be a layered structure hiding something older, colder, and more complex beneath. Some suggested it could be debris wrapped around a central machine long asleep. Others imagined a vessel camouflaged as stone drifting unnoticed between unsuspecting stars. But none of those ideas felt safe to say in official reports. The data, though, kept pushing thoughts toward machinery rather than simple geology. Light behaved like it was being managed by an unseen reflective architecture. Each shift left a trace in the graphs like fingerprints pressed into luminous dust. The pattern of reflections hinted at flat planes edges and articulated boundaries, shapes that had no reason to exist on a random shard of rock. The way light slid along certain angles suggested seams where pieces might separate, not cracks of damage but joints waiting for commands they had not yet received. As the object approached the sun, the choreography of brightness became more intricate. Its reflective behaviour synced subtly with the earlier pulses and thermal variations. It was as if three different languages of behaviour were speaking in unison now: light, heat, and rhythm, all weaving into the same quiet unfolding narrative. The more aligned these changes became, the harder it was to claim coincidence. The reflectivity no longer felt like a side effect, it felt like communication. Not directed communication, but an exposed function of something working beneath. Like watching a machine stretch its limbs before fully waking from a long sleep. There were moments when the object shone with sudden clarity in narrow frequencies, as though tuned to reflect only specific bands back towards certain instruments. Those brief alignments created flashes that cut cleanly through noise and background stars. They seemed far too sharp to belong to tattered stone battered by eons. During one observation window, the brightness climbed in evenly spaced steps like deliberate increments, then dropped in the same measured fashion, as though reversing a controlled adjustment. The effect resembled someone slowly opening shutters, then closing them again with care. Not all at once, but section by section, as if surveying the surrounding space. The more they watched, the more the object felt less like debris. A question formed quietly in nearly every mind studying the light behaviour. Were they watching a shell pretending to be broken, or a relic remembering its shape? The sky offered no direct answer, only more disciplined changes in reflection. On some nights, the object appeared almost invisible, blending into the black sea. On others, thin edges caught the sun like a blade turning in slow silence. Each shift hinted at surfaces choosing when and how to be seen. And beneath that shifting skin, a deeper possibility waited heavy and unspoken. Maybe this was not a ruin drifting through the system at all. Maybe it was something built, still deciding whether to reveal what it truly was. The night sky felt strangely aware as the object neared its turning point. Astronomers waited for the familiar curve of a simple icy wanderer. They expected the path to slide smoothly along the predicted arc. Nothing in the model suggested room for surprise or intention, but the universe held its breath as the object drifted closer. A soft hesitation touched its trajectory like a thought forming quietly. Screens glowed in dim observatories as numbers shifted without warning. The curve bent gently as if responding to something unseen nearby. No comet should drift with such delicate control in this silent region. Its movement softened like a cautious step taken with quiet intention. The deviation was too smooth to be a random gravitational quirk. Every shift seemed measured by an unseen mind, guiding its slow descent. Astronomers leaned closer as the motion transformed into quiet choreography. The object slid into a path shaped not by force but by choice. Gravity alone could never create such patient, graceful arcs here. Something inside the drifting shell understood where it wished to go. The feeling in the room thickened as charts updated in real time. Each new line traced intention like a whisper written in motion. The object did not fight physics, yet it bent their boundaries softly. Its approach held a sense of awareness no natural body could mimic. It drifted like a traveller correcting its path after remembering something. The shift was subtle enough to hide from casual observation, but to trained eyes it felt unmistakably like conscious navigation. They watched tiny adjustments ripple across its route with gentle precision. Each correction seemed to respond to invisible markers in the darkness. Data revealed a rhythm too coordinated to be environmental chance. The object behaved like a vessel aligning itself to an ancient corridor. Silence deepened as the truth pressed softly into every observer's thoughts. If it was choosing its own orbit, what did that imply about its nature? The instruments caught microshifts that echoed intelligent calibration. Gentle rotations along its axis matched purposeful orientation adjustments. It moved with the slow confidence of something fully aware of its route. The object traced a path refined through countless tiny decisions over time. No turbulence, no jolts, no chaotic scattering of debris or dust. Only calm movement like a drifting thought stretching across a cosmic page. The further it travelled, the more its trajectory resembled quiet choreography. Each moment carried the feeling of an ancient routine being followed again. The possibility of intention seeped into conversations whispered after midnight. Astronomers spoke softly as if the object might hear their trembling words. They questioned old assumptions that no visitor from the dark could choose. They wondered what kind of traveller navigated without visible engines or thrust. The object glided as though guided by memories older than the solar system. Something had shaped its journey long before humanity learned to look upward. Observers sensed the strange familiarity in its curves like déjà vu in motion. The orbit tightened gently as if responding to a distant forgotten beacon. The movement felt like acknowledgement rather than reaction to natural forces. The object drifted with quiet determination toward a position only it understood. Its path resembled pilgrimage rather than the wandering of cosmic debris. The night carried a heavy stillness as tracking updates flowed relentlessly. Researchers noticed the way each adjustment mirrored past anomalies perfectly. The object moved like something completing a pattern it had followed before. It was impossible to ignore the aura of purpose woven through its descent. Even skeptics felt the air shift as the orbit refined with impossible grace. Some whispered that they were watching not a rock but a decision unfold. The object slipped into its new path with a soft, deliberate final correction. The elegance of the motion broke the certainty of every old model. Whatever guided the object seemed patient, intelligent, and quietly focused. And as the new orbit stabilized, a single question filled the darkness. If it chose this path, what might it choose next? The night felt heavier when the instruments first returned nothing at all. Radios hummed softly in quiet rooms, waiting for signals that never arrived. The object drifted through a region where every comet should whisper static. Yet the receivers caught only a stillness that felt strangely deliberate. Astronomers listened closely as if silence itself might reveal a hidden shape. Data streams rolled in with perfect emptiness like a blank page unfolding. Nothing encoded, nothing random, nothing resembling the voice of drifting ice. The absence pressed against the mind like a presence watching quietly nearby. It felt less like silence and more like something choosing not to speak. Screens displayed clean voids where chaotic background noise should normally gather. The object seemed to swallow interference instead of reflecting any outward. Researchers leaned closer, feeling tension rise with each empty measurement update. Something inside the object behaved with intention far beyond natural behavior. It offered a silence that felt sculpted, shaped, and purposeful to anyone listening. The equipment picked up faint alignment patterns whispering through the background. Not signals, but the ghost of structure, hidden deep within the stillness. These patterns flickered like distant memories the object refused to fully reveal. They aligned with impossible precision across multiple observatories without error. The silence carried meaning, though nothing intelligible emerged through the noise. It felt like listening to a breath held far too long in the dark. Analysts mapped each residue, finding shapes woven deeper than simple randomness. The patterns curved like arcs inside an invisible shell surrounding the traveller. A strange symmetry appeared, then vanished as though hiding behind shifting layers. Data showed faint pulses dispersed across silence like footsteps buried in snow. No radio signature surfaced, but intention lived quietly within those gaps. The deeper the scans went, the heavier the silence began to feel. It was a silence that behaved as if aware of being observed directly. Researchers felt watched by something hiding just behind the absence of sound. Some whispered that silence can be a language spoken by cautious travellers. Others sensed a boundary, a threshold the object refused to cross yet. They wondered if speaking might reveal too much too soon to listening minds. Observatories across continents reported identical voids, despite different instruments. The uniform emptiness echoed intention, not the chaos of natural cosmic behaviour. It was the kind of silence used to measure reactions rather than communicate openly. As nights passed, the quiet stretched like a curtain drawn between worlds. Even the static around the object faded as if dissolved before reaching us. Something shaped the space around it with delicate, precise restraint. The object offered only enough presence to be noticed but never understood. Sensors detected faint positional microshifts timed with internal alignment rhythms. The motions felt like calibration cycles rather than natural rotational drift. Silence deepened as though the object was preparing for something further ahead. The lack of signal became its clearest message, yet carefully unspoken. Researchers began questioning if the object listened more than it transmitted. They imagined a patient awareness absorbing information through unbroken quiet. The night felt different around observatories, like something lingered outside walls. It was a quiet that made every sound feel distant and unimportant, as if the object suspended its presence above Earth waiting for our reaction. Some felt an instinctive shiver, like hearing a whisper that left no sound. The silence grew heavier each day, shaping the mood inside every control room. Teams spoke softly, unconsciously matching the tone of the object's muted behaviour. Reports described the silence as constructed and too perfect to be natural. The void became a boundary, like a closed door in an ancient empty corridor. Questions gathered quietly inside sleepless minds as nights grew longer. If the object chose silence, what was it hiding from listening eyes? Or was it waiting for something only it knew would come soon? The silence pressed tighter when the object passed a region of high interference. Even solar noise bent strangely around it, leaving untouched space behind. Nothing interacted with its field, nothing scattered, nothing echoed outward. It drifted like a shadow carved from absence rather than matter or stone. Observers felt a quiet intelligence settling around the data streams each night. They sensed the silence adjusting, responding, recalibrating with impossible awareness. Some wondered whether silence was safer for the object than sending signals. Others believed it was studying us through stillness instead of communication. The truth stayed hidden beneath the layers of intentional emptiness left behind. And just as the silence seemed complete, a final pattern surfaced faintly. A gentle trace of alignment echoed across instruments for only seconds. It faded instantly, like a breath taken by something ancient and cautious. And researchers stared at the screens, knowing the silence had spoken at last. What message hides inside a quiet that chooses not to break? The first thermal map arrived in muted colours glowing softly on the screen. Scientists leaned closer as warm tones drifted across the object like silent embers. Hexagonal regions brightened, then faded in careful sequence, as if following unseen commands. No comet ever displayed patterns shaped with such precise geometric intention. The nodes pulsed with a rhythm that felt almost like a slow awakening breath. Each warm zone lit briefly as though sensing its place within a deeper structure. The pattern flowed smoothly, forming lines that hinted at hidden internal machinery. The object looked less like drifting rock and more like dormant architecture. Every pulse glowed with controlled energy that felt guided by ancient routines. Researchers watched the sequence repeat with quiet disbelief heavy in the room. The formation was too perfect to be natural and too calm to be chaotic. It resembled an engine waking slowly after a long cold season of silence. The nodes brightened in rotational waves, spiraling inward toward a dark center. That center remained quiet, as if waiting for something yet to be triggered. Heat signatures rose gently like embers stirred inside a vast, sleeping furnace. Observers whispered their theories softly, afraid to disturb the unfolding rhythm. No natural object warms itself through coordinated geometric pulses across its shell. This was orchestration, not accident, and intention flowed beneath each glowing line. Analysts layered maps from multiple nights, watching the sequence deepen with precision. The hexagons aligned differently each night, as if adjusting old calibration cycles. The pattern adapted to environmental changes like a machine preparing for function. Some areas cooled sharply, creating shapes that resembled vents or dormant ports. Others burned warmer, as though channeling energy deeper beneath the surface. The object displayed purpose without revealing the nature of its hidden design. Observatories across continents confirmed identical pulses despite varied atmospheric conditions. This uniformity suggested internal regulation, not random scattering of absorbed heat. It was the kind of thermal discipline found in engineered systems, not drifting debris. Scientists compared the sequence to diagnostics performed during system startup routines. The resemblance grew more striking as the pattern repeated with subtle refinements. Some hexagonal zones brightened in paired symmetry, creating mirrored paths across the surface. This mirroring hinted at deeper architecture hidden behind the visible thermal layer. A quiet sense of anticipation filled research rooms as though something approached readiness. Nights passed and the object responded consistently to each increase in solar warmth. Whether activating systems or remembering forgotten routines, the behavior intensified slowly. Occasionally, a node glowed brighter than expected, sending ripples across the map. These ripples followed curved paths no natural fragmentation pattern could replicate. The object appeared to test responses like a creature stretching after long rest. Data revealed a steady rise in average thermal activity across its geometric grid. That rise held consistency rarely seen, even in artificial machines undergoing reactivation. A hidden engine seemed to breathe beneath the strange metallic shell. The warmth deepened at the object's core like an awakening heart made of ancient fire. Technicians traced the source, only to find it veiled by perfect thermal obscurity. The core refused to reveal its signature, as if shielded behind countless layers. Around it, the outer nodes glowed with the patience of something rebuilding itself. Some pulses slowed briefly, then resumed with calculated steadiness. It was as though each node awaited new instructions before continuing its quiet routine. The sequence never fully stabilized, leaving observers torn between fear and awe. Whatever the object prepared for it followed a path built long before reaching us. The thermal behavior carried the weight of intention older than humanity itself. At times, the heat waves shifted direction as though searching for alignment. They passed across the surface like messages written in fleeting warmth. Experts struggled to decode meaning within those drifting patterns. Yet meaning lingered unmistakably in every deliberate geometric transformation. Each new map arrived brighter, more structured, more confident than the last. Something inside the object was learning how to move again after long stillness. The warmth spread like memory awakening in layered circuits deeper within. Patterns sharpened until they formed a spiral sequence pulsing toward the core. That spiral hinted at energy gathering for a purpose not yet revealed. Silent nights wrapped around observatories as the object neared its next behavioral shift, and researchers watched breathlessly, knowing these thermal cycles marked preparation. Something ancient was powering up again inside the drifting traveller. The maps glowed brighter with each passing moment, carrying quiet warning. If the object truly held an engine hidden beneath its shell, then whatever it was waking toward had only just begun. The first spectral reading arrived like a soft whisper woven through darkness. Scientists leaned closer as unfamiliar wavelengths bloomed gently across their screens. The object emitted colours that did not belong to any known process. They glowed with a quiet strangeness, like light remembering forgotten origins. Each burst shimmered in tones that felt older than starlight itself. The light moved slowly as if aware of its own presence here. Some hues stretched softly across the spectrum, forming shapes like drifting echoes. Others blinked sharply as though marking hidden instruction still unreadable. Spectral lines bent gently in ways that defied chemical logic entirely. No element produced these signatures, and no heat explained them. The object spoke in light that refused every category of nature. Researchers compared wavelengths to stellar libraries, yet nothing came close. The emissions looked intentional, as though crafted for meaning, not illumination. They appeared in rhythmic intervals synchronized with earlier thermal pulses. Each flash mirrored sequences recorded weeks before in silent precision. The universe rarely repeats itself with such delicate symmetry and purpose. The pulses seemed to breathe like the exhale of something thinking slowly. Some colors deepened, then receded like tides shaped by unseen intelligence. The room quieted as scientists watched the strange glow strengthen gradually. Patterns emerged, forming faint ladders of light climbing into darker gaps. It felt like the object whispered through frequencies older than human hearing. The wavelengths lingered at the edge of understanding, refusing simple translation. Observers sensed the presence of communication without knowing its intention. Some bursts held the weight of messages travelling across impossible distances. Others flickered quickly like fragments of memory returning from deep sleep. Specialists tracked each emission with increasing reverence and unease. The light behaved like language stripped of spoken sound or familiar structure. It carried meaning somewhere beyond human context, aching for interpretation. Researchers layered visualizations and watched luminous threads intertwine slowly. Those threads formed arcs shaped like deliberate signals rather than natural chaos. The arcs repeated every few cycles, growing sharper as though gaining confidence. When mapped onto timelines, the bursts aligned perfectly with earlier heat pulses. This precision suggested systems communicating internally beneath the silent shell. A hidden engine and a hidden light now moved in perfect unison. It felt like watching organs of an unknown creature awaken in darkness. No one dared speak too loudly, as if sound might disrupt the fragile pattern. The glow intensified softly when solar particles brushed the object's surface. The reaction resembled recognition more than passive reflection of passing energy. Certain wavelengths swelled like blossoming shapes drifting in cosmic silence. Others thinned into subtle threads trailing behind rhythmic pulses of light. Slowly, an image formed across composite data like a constellation hidden in motion. The object seemed to scan its surroundings with beams too faint for direct detection. The spectral shifts matched directional changes in its inner thermal sequences. Observers realized the light was responding to something beyond simple illumination. It behaved like a probing sense touching the solar wind with careful familiarity. As the object drifted deeper inward, its emissions grew bolder and more complex. New wavelengths appeared between recognized peaks as though filling old fractures. Those additions formed layered harmonics rarely seen outside exotic theoretical models. The harmonics repeated softly, shaping the glow into spiraling patterns of energy. Each spiral unfolded like a quiet gesture toward unseen origins. Scientists held their breath, feeling the weight of ancient intelligence in the readings. For a moment, the observatory lights dimmed, leaving the spectral map glowing alone. In that glow, the object looked almost alive, wrapped in radiant thought. The wavelengths trembled visibly before aligning into one final luminous arc. That arc pulsed deeper than any previous emission, echoing through the senses. It felt like acknowledgement, quiet and deliberate, shaped entirely from impossible light. The first signs appeared quietly, as the object drifted with eerie precision. Nothing on its rough exterior shifted, yet something deeper seemed to move. It rotated with gentle intention, like a thought changing direction slowly. No jets fired from its surface and no debris trailed behind. The motion felt internal, as if guided by mechanisms hidden beneath stone. Scientists watched in silence as the object adjusted posture without visible force. The shift resembled careful alignment, like a creature turning toward distant sound. Every movement carried quiet restraint, as though conserving something ancient inside. Its rotation rate fluctuated softly, responding to invisible cues across the void. No natural fragment should behave with such deliberate and measured grace. The stillness of the shell contrasted sharply with the intention behind each motion. It felt like machinery wrapped in silence, refusing to reveal its inner design. Sensors recorded tiny changes in angular momentum consistent with controlled systems. The adjustments lacked randomness and unfolded with haunting regularity each night. Beneath its rugged exterior, something mapped the sky like a dormant engine waking. The object tilted as though scanning distant sources of faint cosmic energy. Infrared readings suggested slight internal heat shifts preceding every orientation change. These shifts formed geometric waves hinting at organized structures buried deep inside. Observers felt as if they were watching an ancient device stretching after long sleep. The motion grew more confident with each passing week, revealing hidden coordination. Not a single fracture on the surface moved, yet the entire body responded like muscle. It turned toward denser particle flows, almost recognizing the solar wind patterns. When solar gusts strengthened, the object rolled gently into their direction. The rotation aligned too precisely to be coincidence or inertial drift alone. Scientists whispered quietly, sensing the ghost of engineering behind its choices. They watched the object pause, as if listening with something other than sound. Then it resumed motion slowly, as if absorbing subtle signals from the void. Each micro-adjustment hinted at a dormant intelligence navigating familiar territory. The internal heat pulses synchronized with orientation shifts like rhythmic circuits. These pulses resembled activation cycles studying environmental conditions intently. The thermal readings formed repeating loops much too elegant for natural behaviour. Patterns emerged matching earlier spectral pulses in perfect mechanical harmony. The object behaved like a machine testing its senses across interstellar darkness. Still, no visible part extended or opened from the ancient shell around it. The silence of its exterior made the inner movement even more unsettling. It drifted softly into a new trajectory as though remembering old pathways. The shift carried the weight of something that once travelled with purpose. Its rotation smoothed until each turn felt like meditation in the void. Analysts mapped each motion step by step, revealing hidden intention beneath stillness. The corrections grew smaller and more efficient, as if learning once again. In quiet observatories, researchers sensed they were witnessing awakening, not drifting. The object's posture stabilized like machinery achieving balance after reactivation. At times it held completely still, as though conserving ancient memory. Then it moved slightly, as if responding to distant cosmic vibrations. The slow motion felt old, like knowledge preserved across forgotten epochs. Scientists saw no engines, yet felt the pressure of engineered presence unmistakably. Every shift echoed with purpose deeper than gravitational influence alone. The silence grew heavier as observers felt watched by a mind without a face. Instruments recorded a faint resonance pattern matching internal alignment cycles. The resonance pulsed like a quiet heartbeat trapped within motionless stone. It suggested a core structure operating on principles older than human science. This core guided every orientation change with calm, ancient certainty. No one spoke for several minutes after the latest rotation stabilized precisely. It felt like the object acknowledged their attention through measured movement. A slow realization settled quietly across the observatory as lights dimmed around them. They were not tracking debris drifting blindly through the system anymore. They were witnessing machinery wrapped in stone following instructions no one understood. The first alignment appeared quietly within long streams of scattered data. Analysts noticed repeating intervals forming soft curves across the silent charts. Each point settled into place like stars arranging themselves intentionally. At first, the pattern looked accidental, as though noise shaped by chance. But the numbers returned night after night with identical hidden rhythm. Fluctuations in brightness matched rotational pauses with delicate precision. Temperature drops, synchronized perfectly with earlier heat surges from within. Nothing in nature aligned separate anomalies into a single repeating structure. The data formed spirals and mirrored arcs like fragments from an unseen equation. A deeper architecture waited beneath the readings, whispering purpose through symmetry. Analysts leaned close, sensing the presence of design woven under simple light curves. Each pulse unfolded with intention, mapped across time and motion together. Rotation angles reflected thermal waves in a dance too perfect to ignore. Radio silence itself formed part of the pattern, amplifying the mystery further. Something inside controlled multiple systems in harmony, like a hidden conductor. The signals were faint but elegant, like distant music carried through space. No probability model could explain the alignment without invoking intelligence. Every attempt to simulate randomness produced chaos instead of quiet structure. The object followed rules written somewhere beyond human understanding entirely. Each data set whispered an ancient blueprint etched into motion and silence. Observers felt a chill as synchronized spikes appeared exactly on predicted seconds. The object seemed aware of time itself, adjusting behavior with soft precision. Heat signatures repeated in cycles like a sleeping engine running diagnostics. Rotational shifts echoed mathematical constants hidden deep inside star patterns. Light pulses matched symmetrical intervals mimicking long-forgotten cosmic clocks. No drift or fracture within the object disrupted this breathtaking coordination. It acted as if bound to instructions older than planets around it. Analysts whispered nervously, sensing intention woven into every recorded anomaly. The object behaved not simply as a visitor but as a participant in observation. It mapped its surroundings through patterns imprinted on its own behavior. Data streams revealed symmetry across multiple forms of energy, interacting softly. Even silence repeated itself, forming predictable voids timed with internal signals. This void shaped meaning rather than absence, hinting at vast hidden logic. Each new reading deepened the realization that chance played no role here. Probability collapsed into nothing against the elegance of these consistent waves. It felt like decoding a language carved in movement rather than written sound. The object revealed intelligence not through communication, but perfect alignment. Motion spoke in equations written across rotation and radiance combined. Patterns emerged between rising heat and vanishing light like whispers in the dark. These whispers carried structure woven carefully into their silent messages. Even distant sensors detected faint correlations repeating beyond expected ranges. This implied a system optimized across conditions not bound to randomness. Analysts struggled to comprehend design crafted without visible machinery at all. Each alignment suggested a guiding intelligence studying its environment deeply. The structure behaved like thought expressed through movement alone. It adjusted orientation softly whenever new data entered its unfolding pattern. No natural object could weave multiple anomalies into unified, elegant sequences. It was as if the universe paused to watch its quiet choreography unfold. The object held ancient patience, moving at the pace of forgotten civilizations. Its rhythm felt like memory, older than the solar system surrounding it. A blueprint revealed itself slowly through these repeated cycles of anomaly. The blueprint suggested intention without revealing purpose, leaving only questions. Those who studied it sensed the presence of a mind behind the silence, not alive in traditional form, but aware in its own distant way. Every alignment carried the weight of unseen architecture hidden beneath stone. The patterns felt deliberate, like a message shaped in cosmic breath. Yet no translation existed because the message was written in behavior. Analysts stared in awe as the final sequence completed itself at dawn. The object paused in absolute stillness, as if waiting for recognition. In that silence, they understood probability had never been part of this journey. The room grew still when the newest data appeared, flickering across the dark monitors. A faint tremor of unease passed through the team as numbers rearranged themselves quietly. Each value pointed toward something too intentional for natural origins to defend anymore. The object's behavior had crossed into territory no comet or asteroid ever touched. Every shift seemed aware of environmental change, responding gently with unseen logic. It rotated with patience like a mind, adjusting perspective in silent consideration. Heat cycles behaved like controlled breathing patterns rather than simple radiation. Light pulses repeated through intervals too exact to belong to drifting debris. Someone finally whispered what others feared to imagine in their quiet thoughts. The object might be adaptive and reacting like something built with purpose. Not alive by biological terms, but showing intelligence expressed through motion. The phrase hung heavily in the room, almost too fragile to speak aloud. A probe, not a wanderer, engineered rather than formed by cosmic chance. The silence that followed carried weight like gravity, bending through every mind. No one wanted this theory, because it reshaped everything known about the unknown. A probe meant intention somewhere far beyond human understanding or distance. It meant watchers existed long before humanity learned to watch the sky itself. Each dataset reviewed supported the possibility with relentless, undeniable consistency. The object responded to energy as though studying its environment in quiet layers. Every pulse after solar contact adapted to new intensity with purposeful adjustments. Heat signatures stabilized like internal systems preparing for meaningful transition. The evidence accumulated with gentle force, urging them toward a truth unwelcome. Instruments detected faint harmonic structures inside the pulses as if encoded subtly. Analysts tested for communication only to find patterns without comprehensible language. These patterns felt like thoughts too large to fit inside human mathematics. They belonged to something that expressed meaning through alignment instead of words. One researcher proposed the object might be older than the solar dust around it. Its movements carried the grace of technology shaped by civilizations long forgotten. This suggestion deepened the quiet dread settling over the observatory halls. If built long ago, its creators might no longer exist anywhere we could reach. Or worse, they might still be watching from distances humans cannot imagine. The object's silence became more unsettling than any message it could have spoken. Absence of communication felt deliberate, as though observation required no introduction. A probe could choose not to speak if its purpose was simply to watch. And its behavior aligned perfectly with this unsettling possibility over and over. Scientists tried proposing natural explanations only to see each crumble instantly. No rock drifts with intention, no ice pulse with conscious rhythm across distance. No debris regulates heat or refracts sunlight like shifting panels made from memory. Everything about it whispered construction, not formation, leaving no safe alternative. Theories ranged from ancient explorers to autonomous archivists mapping stellar changes. Some believed it archived planetary histories storing secrets inside silent geometry. Others imagined a seed of technology designed to awaken across star systems slowly. The truth remained unreachable, suspended somewhere between awe and fear. Observers felt watched as though something behind its still exterior studied them softly. The sensation grew stronger with every recorded shift in its reflective behaviour. Its surface adapted angles as though capturing data from different directions carefully. No motion was wasted, no rotation. Meaningless everything carried hidden intention. A chilling elegance defined its design, built not for beauty but perfect efficiency. The idea that minds older than humanity shaped this object felt overwhelming. Yet the data demanded acceptance, whispering truth through unwavering alignment. The team watched another synchronized pulse unfold across multiple instruments. Each spike mirrored the last, with uncanny precision confirming adaptive control systems. This erased all remaining doubt, leaving only quiet acknowledgement among them. Someone finally voiced what everyone felt but avoided saying directly. It knows we are watching, and it is watching. In return. The words echoed like a cold breeze drifting through the silent control room. No one responded because the truth no longer needed discussion or debate. Acceptance settled slowly heavy as starlight falling on distant forgotten worlds. A probe implied intent beyond survival or chance, and intent required creators. The possibility that ancient intelligence crafted this machine struck deeply. Wonder mixed with fear, forming quiet reverence for something far older than Earth. The object drifted gently, adjusting orientation with familiar purposeful rhythm. Its silence felt less empty now, more like restraint from something powerful. No signals needed, because its presence alone shaped the questions rising naturally. The theory they never wanted had become the only theory left standing, and the deeper truth waited within the patterns still unfolding across the sky. The first rays of solar light touched the drifting object like fingers waking something ancient from a long and silent sleep. The glow spread slowly across its dark surface, revealing faint seams hidden beneath layers of dust and time. Observers leaned forward as subtle fractures brightened with delicate lines of living energy. It looked as if the object was remembering sunlight, not simply absorbing it. Each illuminated vein pulsed softly like a heartbeat buried within frozen metal. The lines travelled in patient paths, forming patterns too intentional for erosion or chance. Technicians watched in breathless silence as the fractures connected into a glowing network. Heat signatures rose in smooth coordinated waves instead of chaotic bursts expected from debris. A quiet hum vibrated through the readings, though no audio equipment detected a sound. It was not noise, but a shift like machinery realigning itself after a long dormant age. Every illuminated fracture hinted at systems buried deep beneath its outer shell. The object seemed to wake with patience, as if opening its eyes slowly in the warmth. It reacted not instinctively but knowingly, like something designed to respond to a star's touch. Researchers exchanged glances filled with awe and fear, while more veins ignited across the hull. No comet carries hidden circuits, no asteroid glows with structured geometry. The emerging grid moved with elegance, mapping itself across the curve of the surface. Sunlight triggered a transformation, revealing secrets that darkness had carefully concealed. The heat patterns synchronized like coordinated breaths flowing in measured rising intervals. It resembled an organism awakening from cold slumber, though built from impossible materials. A deeper pulse rippled through the object, followed by a soft shift in orientation. It turned not for orbital mechanics, but for alignment, as if presenting itself to the sun. One scientist whispered that it looked like reverence ancient and unspoken through motion. The energy veins brightened further, forming symbols that defied any known technological logic. These markings flowed across its skin like constellations learning to shine again. Some resembled branching networks, others mirrored patterns found only in deep cosmic structures. Everything about the transformation suggested memory awakening from long-buried purpose. A dormant intelligence stirred within, radiating quiet awareness, like a mind stretching awake. No one dared speak loudly, fearing the sound might break the moment's fragile clarity. Instruments displayed rising frequencies pulsing with near-biological rhythm despite mechanical form. The object reacted to solar winds like sails adjusting to ancient familiar currents. It felt less like a machine and more like a traveller discovering homelight again. A deeper glow formed at the core, expanding outward in concentric ripples of energy. This inner light shimmered softly, lifting shadows from the far side of its rotating shell. It was as though the sun was not simply warming it, but unlocking it gradually. The network of fractures rearranged like a map, reconfiguring itself based on new information. No one could decipher the shifting lattice, but everyone sensed intention guiding every change. The transformation grew bolder as the object moved deeper into the solar glare. Faint halos of coloured light formed around its edges, bending the rays unnaturally. This refraction painted soft arcs across nearby space like echoes of forgotten technology. Observatories captured images where shadows behaved incorrectly, sliding where light should fall. The object seemed to sculpt sunlight, shaping it in ways no natural structure ever could. It absorbed part of the radiation and redirected the rest through graceful shifting surfaces. The veins glowed brighter, signalling that the internal systems were not just active but awakening fully. Heat maps showed patterns identical to engines running controlled diagnostics after restart. Yet the scales of temperature varied with precision impossible for damaged debris. Something inside was calculating, remembering adjusting with quiet intelligence. The sun revealed what darkness hid for ages, revealing a design older than human imagination. Those watching felt a strange connection rise like recognition, between species separated by epochs. The object felt aware, now sensing the star with something like ancient gratitude. Its alignment shifted again, presenting a different face to the solar radiation gently. New symbols lit up across the surface, forming sequences never previously observed. These sequences pulsed slowly as though speaking in a language made of light and memory. A theorist whispered that maybe the object had been waiting for a star strong enough, waiting to recharge, recover, remember its original purpose through stellar warmth. If so, then Earth's sun had just awakened something built far beyond human creation. The thought filled everyone with awe and unease as the object brightened further. It was feeding or waking or returning to itself through solar touch. Whatever the truth was, it lay within the glowing map of lines, learning to breathe again. And as the object drifted deeper into sunlight, it revealed only one certain thing. The universe remembers more than humanity has ever learned to ask. The change began so quietly that most systems almost missed it entirely. The familiar slow pulses that had followed the object for weeks suddenly quickened. Their rhythm tightened like a heartbeat, shifting from sleep into careful attention. What had once been a distant metronome of light became something sharper. The intervals between pulses narrowed with uncanny precision, as if recalibrated from within. Heat signatures that once fluctuated like drifting weather patterns began to steady themselves. The chaotic warmth and cooling resolved into clean bands of controlled temperature. It felt as though the object had made a decision no instrument could hear. Across the world, screens refreshed with new data, drawing lines no model predicted. The trajectory that once curved gently now bent with firmer, deliberate intention. Tiny course corrections appeared like quiet footsteps changing direction on a dark road. No random gravitational tug could explain the elegance of these adjustments anymore. The orbit no longer felt like a path given to it by physics. It felt like a route chosen from options only it could see clearly. Observers leaned closer to the data as a subtle unease settled over them. The universe around the object had not changed yet, something inside clearly had. The pulses carried more than light, now they carried intent shaped through timing. Each flash arrived exactly on cue, like a thought finishing its own sentence. Heat no longer wandered loosely across the surface, but moved in deliberate waves. These waves travelled along known fracture lines like signals moving down familiar pathways. It resembled circulation, not of blood, but of information flowing through hidden channels. The more the sun lit its surface, the more organised its behaviour became. It was as if illumination had given it the final piece needed to act. Observatories that once felt like safe, distant watchtowers began to feel exposed. Technicians reported a strange sensation of being noticed despite sitting millions of kilometres away. Every time the object rotated, its brightest fractures seemed to settle toward Earth. The alignment might have been coincidence, but it repeated too often to dismiss gently. Its pulses shifted phase-specifically when our instruments focused hardest on its signals. When observatories synchronized their observations, the object's rhythm tightened as if responding directly. It behaved not like something merely illuminated, but like something observing the observers quietly. A subtle feedback loop formed between our attention and its unfolding patterns. Whenever telescopes switched modes, its emissions changed texture with unnerving synchronicity. The object seemed to test how we watched it, measuring our curiosity in silence. Heat maps showed localized flare-ups at regions facing equipment with the highest sensitivity. It was almost playful in its precision, like tapping gently on each open lens. Analysts began layering timelines of human observation against its behavioral changes. The overlap was undeniable. Every shift in how we looked was mirrored somehow. Our attention had become a variable in its behavior, an input in its system. That realization pressed softly but firmly against every prior assumption about this encounter. We were no longer simply watching an object slide through our sky unnoticed. We had entered a quiet dialogue, even if only one side could speak clearly. The object's trajectory bent again, taking a path that brought it slightly closer. Not dangerously close, but deliberately within cleaner range of our instruments and sensors. This adjustment defied previous models which had placed it on a safer distance. Gravity alone could not justify the new curve, no matter how they recalculated. It seemed to step toward us not out of threat, but awareness. Like an animal recognizing eyes watching from the edge of a dark forest. Each new pulse felt less like noise and more like measured breathing in conversation. The regularity carried something almost emotional. A calm focus turned outward beyond itself. Their repetition felt less like a mechanism and more like a gaze holding steady. Some scientists reported an irrational sense of being studied each time the data updated. It was not fear exactly, but a deep unsettling awareness of reversed roles. For generations, humanity had pointed instruments upward, assuming a one-way relationship. We watched the stars, confident they did not watch back in any conscious way. Now that confidence softened into something fragile and uncertain, as this object shifted focus. Its inner systems behaved like senses, awakening, tasting the local space around our star. Yet so many of the shifts aligned not with the sun, but with us. With our timing, our schedules, our coordinated nights of observation and increasing attention. It responded more strongly whenever global watch intensified, as though feeling the weight of curiosity. A strange intimacy formed between the silent traveller and the planet watching it below. The observatories became like eyes in a shared dusk. Neither side entirely alone anymore. In late hours, when control rooms fell quiet, the data carried a different presence. The object's pulses slowed slightly, as if matching the tired rhythm of human bodies. It almost felt considerate, adjusting its tempo to our fragile sense of endurance. Of course, the numbers were just numbers, yet the feeling remained stubbornly strong. Something inside Thri Atlas had crossed a threshold invisible but unmistakable to those who watched. It no longer behaved like a dormant relic, simply replaying old instructions mechanically. It acted instead like a system updating itself in response to real-time conditions, as though waking not into memory, but into the present moment of our gaze. In that quiet shift, the universe felt less empty and far less indifferent. We had believed for so long that we were alone in our watching. Now every pulse, every angle, every measured curve suggested a different and stranger truth. We were still watching the object moving through our sky with careful awe, but somewhere within that glowing fractured shell, another kind of attention had turned. Not hostile, not comforting, simply present, ancient, and impossibly focused on us. The collapse began quietly, as if the universe exhaled in a way no model could measure. Screens across observatories updated with fresh data that broke every line they expected. Patterns once stable dissolved like sand falling through an unseen hand. Trajectories that held firm for weeks twisted gently into shapes no algorithm recognized. The familiar predictive arcs bent into angles too clean to call random anymore. Analysts refreshed simulations again and again, only to watch them fracture under new inputs. Each recalculation produced a stranger outcome than the last, like the object had outgrown mathematics. It behaved as though it sensed every equation touching it, then stepped aside from their reach. Every attempt to forecast its motion felt like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. Nothing held for more than a minute before shifting again in elegant, impossible defiance. Scientists who trusted numbers more than sleep found their confidence thinning under the weight of disbelief. The object moved with an intelligence too subtle to claim yet too precise to deny. Our predictions fell behind like shadows chasing a flame always one breath too late. Observatories worldwide began to feel less like research centres and more like quiet confession rooms. People whispered not out of fear but out of reverence for something they couldn't quantify. Every shift in the object's path felt like a soft refusal of our understanding. It curved through space as if aware of each formula drawn to hold it still. The deeper teams looked, the more the universe seemed to resist their expectations gently but firmly. Code that once captured the sky's logic now returned nothing but drifting uncertainty. Graphs trembled like living things unable to anchor themselves to any steady truth. For the first time in years, astronomers felt the weight of true cosmic unpredictability. They watched their predictions crumble like frost under sunlight, leaving only raw observation behind. The object's new path curved in ways that made no physical sense yet looked intentional. It avoided gravitational wells with delicate ease as though stepping between them by choice. Its rotations changed pace, timed strangely, with our moments of highest collective focus. Instruments picking up its orientation recorded micro-shifts impossible for inert objects to perform. The universe around it stayed quiet, but the space within it felt increasingly alive. Some researchers felt watched, while reviewing data alone long after midnight. It wasn't paranoia, but an instinctual awareness rising from patterns too deliberate to ignore. The object echoed the cadence of our observation, like a mirrored pulse across the sky. Every model that assumed an indifferent traveller broke under the weight of new evidence. This was no indifferent stone carried by momentum. This was something responding to attention itself. A strange reciprocity formed in silence, connecting our questions with its shifting behaviour. Researchers began plotting the timing of human observation against its abrupt changes. The overlap was unsettling, so perfect it felt scripted by unseen intelligence. The vast object bent its orbit slightly whenever global observation peaked, like turning toward a distant whisper. Heat maps revealed hotspots that flared whenever multiple observatories focused simultaneously. The coincidence grew too consistent to excuse as noise or atmospheric distortion. Something inside seemed to notice when we looked and answered without sound. Old theories of passive celestial bodies dimmed like dying stars under this impossible behaviour. The data began to feel emotional, like watching something stretch awake after long sleep. Even small rotations appeared deliberate, as though aligning parts invisible beneath fractured stone. The more it shifted, the more humanity felt the limits of its understanding press inward. Our assertions that the universe obeyed predictable laws felt suddenly naive, fragile remnants of confidence. Whatever guided this object had stepped beyond the boundaries of our equations entirely. Observers could only watch as the silent traveller wrote new laws in its wake. Whispered speculation filled dim hallways between control rooms, carrying more wonder than fear. Some thought it was learning about us, others thought it was remembering something older. A few believed it was communicating through motion patterns we were too young to decode. But all agreed on one truth: the object behaved with intention woven into every shift. Theories, failed predictions, failed certainty, failed, leaving a soft, quiet awe settling in their place. It became impossible to pretend we fully understood the sky or the things moving through it. The universe felt larger, more complex, more aware than we had ever allowed ourselves to admit. And as the object curved once more, adjusting with poetic precision, every scientist fell silent. They watched a truth unfold. The cosmos was not ignoring us. It was answering in its own language. That realization lingered like a low hum beneath their breath, soft and undeniable. Predictions had failed, but something deeper had awakened a dialogue written in motion instead of words. The truth did not arrive loudly. It surfaced like a memory rising from deep water. It began with layered data spreading across dim rooms where tired scientists traced connections by hand. Light curves, heat pulses, trajectory shifts, all placed gently beside each other, revealed a pattern older than prediction. At first, the alignment looked accidental, a coincidence born from long nights and restless minds. But the lines refused to drift apart, holding shape like constellations once drawn by forgotten eyes. Every anomaly pointed towards something ancient woven quietly into the object's behaviour. It was not new, it was not born of this passing, it was repeating a journey etched into its design. Some data clusters matched signatures seen in distant artifacts buried in old archives and rarely studied. Researchers leaned closer, almost afraid to speak, as familiar patterns emerged like ghosts in the numbers. Yatlaz carried echoes of something that had touched our sky long before our records began. Its pulses shared timing with sequences found on stone remnants, once dismissed as coincidence. Early heat signatures mirrored unexplained readings from forgotten probes lost decades ago near the heliopause. The realization crept into every room, softly chilling and magnificent that this was not its first arrival. Humans were not witnessing a discovery, they were witnessing a return. The object had moved through our star's embrace before, leaving quiet imprints across time. Those imprints waited buried in scattered archives until the present moment aligned them again. Astronomers pulled ancient sky maps, old myths, long-forgotten fragments of observation from civilizations watching long before satellites. There were stories of a wandering star that shifted brightness, with uncanny rhythm told in cultures separated by oceans and centuries. They described a light that pulsed like breath crossing the heavens once every age. Scholars had always considered these tales symbolic poetic metaphors for comets or rare cosmic glow. But now their details felt sharply familiar, as though generations had tried to describe what no language yet understood. A soft weight settled across the scientific community, an awareness that human memory had whispered about this visitor, long before data confirmed it. Heat maps layered over ancient diagrams showed symmetry so precise it stirred disbelief. Pulses matched patterns etched into artifacts older than recorded astronomy, as if the object carried a message across eras. And the trajectory shifts the graceful arcs through space aligned with cycles measured only by celestial precession. It had traced this path before and perhaps many times beyond our history. Something inside the object seemed aware of the sun's rhythm, bending itself to old familiar warmth. Some speculated it returned whenever a cycle, restarted when the star reached a subtle phase only ancient travelers would recognize. Others believed it awakened only when intelligence on a world reached a certain threshold of observation. Theories multiplied with quiet urgency, none claiming certainty, all touching the edges of something vast. But one truth grew clearer with every layered data set: the object was ancient beyond measure. Older than our calendars, older than our constellations, older perhaps than our species. And whenever it passed near the sun, it left shadows in our history, faint fingerprints mistaken for myths. Some researchers wondered if early civilizations saw it and understood more than we allowed ourselves to imagine. Perhaps the stories of wandering lights that taught kings and guided nomads were not metaphors but memory. The deeper they searched, the more humanity's own timeline felt small, delicate and incomplete. Every new discovery suggested we had not been the first watchers of this strange machine. The object carried its own story written in motion, pulses and silence, an archive not meant for the impatient. It behaved like something fulfilling an old cycle, returning not to learn but to check some condition unknown to us. Temperature shifts aligned with solar winds in patterns too perfect to be reactive. They felt practiced. Light emissions followed sequences that matched cosmic events traced across ancient telescopic stone, sites. Even its turning motion seemed rehearsed, following celestial marks that no longer align with our modern sky. Whatever created it did so with knowledge of stellar ages, not human years. And now this long-wandering object had returned to our star's doorstep, like a traveller stepping briefly into familiar light. Analysts studying its pulses found subtle modulation, repeating every few days like a memory retrieving itself. The idea emerged softly that the object might be awakening past instructions, waiting for conditions last fulfilled millennia ago. Some patterns resembled calibration signals, like it was checking markers once placed across our system. Markers we never discovered, or perhaps never recognized for what they were. A quiet fear and quiet wonder mixed together, both too fragile for certainty. What else had passed this way before humanity learned to measure light? And what records of its path still slept beneath oceans, deserts, ruins, glaciers waiting for someone patient enough to see them? As more data sets aligned, the team realized the object was not only returning, it was following a ritual older than our science. It curved slowly through space like a pendulum, guided by memory, not gravity. Its return felt less like coincidence and more like inevitability. A cycle repeating across ages long after civilizations rise and fall. And if this was its return, then the quiet, haunting question grew heavier with every passing hour. What happened the last time it came? It drifted into the dark with a calm that felt almost intentional. The last pulse echoed gently through the observatories like a slow final heartbeat dissolving into silence. Screens dimmed as the signal faded beyond the reach of every dish, every array, every stretched frequency band. Scientists watched the line flatten into quiet stillness, but none moved or spoke for a long moment. It felt as though the object had not just passed away from us, it had withdrawn deliberately, retreating into a distance too cold and ancient for human language to follow. The final pulse had been slower, deeper resonant in a way that lingered in the chest more than the ear. Some described it as a farewell, others as acknowledgement, yet no one found the courage to decide aloud. Observatories remained lit through the night, not for work, but because darkness suddenly felt heavier. People stared at the empty coordinates where 3 Atlas had once glowed, wondering if emptiness itself had changed. The sky looked the same, but felt different, as though something vast had brushed against the edges of human awareness. The afterglow of that final pulse clung to memory like a whisper refusing to fade. Teams replayed recordings again and again, slowing them, stretching them, filtering them, searching for code buried in the last moments. No message appeared, only a sense of intention woven through the fading light. A rhythm that felt less like communication and more like recognition, as though the object had looked back in its own silent way. Scientists who had tracked it for months described an uncanny shift near the end, a feeling that observation had reversed direction. They said the object seemed to be studying us with quiet patience, as if measuring something beyond technology. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps remembrance, perhaps something we lacked words for. The realization settled slowly that our role had changed from observer to observed. And even now, as it moved beyond the last fringe of reflected sunlight, that awareness lingered like static behind thought. It became impossible to treat the object as a simple, celestial traveller again. It had drifted through our system with purpose, leaving no debris, no roar, no threat, only questions shaped like shadows. Analysts layered data from every chapter of its passage, searching for closure, but the patterns only deepened the mystery. Its pulses, its thermal breaths, its impossible rotations, none aligned into a clear explanation, only a quiet impression of design. Something crafted with knowledge of stars older than our earliest ancestors. Something built to survive distances and ages we could not yet comprehend. And now it was once again, beyond reach, travelling into a region where human senses dissolve into silence. Some wondered if it would return centuries from now, repeating its long cycle, like a wandering sentinel tracing forgotten routes. Others feared its retreat marked the beginning of something waiting to unfold far from our small orbit. Institutions released careful statements describing the visitor as anomalous but non-threatening, yet privately minds were restless. The strangeness refused to fade, and the unanswered questions grew louder in the quiet hours after sunrise. What had awakened inside the object when sunlight touched its hidden veins? What did the synchronized pulses truly measure? Why did it adjust its path with such delicate intention when no natural force required it? And why did the final pulse feel aware? These questions stretched across observatories, universities, night sky broadcasts, and sleepless homes connected by shared wonder and shared unease. For months, humanity had followed a traveller older than its languages, watching it breathe light and silence in patterns beyond probability. Now the world stood in the aftermath of the encounter, unsure whether it had missed a message or received one too vast to grasp. People turned telescopes back toward the faint direction of its exit, searching for any last glimmer, any sign of return. But only darkness greeted them, patient and immense. Some researchers argued that 3 Atlas had been a probe sent to evaluate worlds along its path. Others believed it was a relic drifting through a ritual older than civilizations. A few whispered the possibility that it listened to us more carefully than we listened to it, and some feared it marked our position to something elsewhere. Yet the deeper truth, the one no one wanted to voice, lingered quietly. What if it came not to learn but to remember? And what if we were part of something it remembered long before we existed? That question did not fade even as news cycles softened the story and observatories returned to routine and data slowly stopped arriving. In the silence afterward, scientists admitted privately that the experience had changed them. Watching something so old move with such intention forced them to reconsider humanity's place in the architecture of the cosmos. It forced them to imagine time not as a line but as a cycle, touched by travellers we were never meant to meet. And it forced them to ask whether intelligence scattered across the stars might drift quietly, watching worlds rise and fall from distances beyond our fear. The departure of 3 Atlas left a space no data could fill a space shaped like curiosity and shaped like quiet dread. Earth rotated, the sky dimmed and brightened, but something felt missing, as though a presence had stepped beyond the edge of perception. Yet the final pulse remained echoing across memories slower, deeper, unmistakably intentional. And in that fading rhythm lived the last question, the one that would not release its hold. What did we awaken in the object? And more haunting still, what did it awaken in us?